Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's panel for the Cinematic Art of Overwatch. My name is Denise. I'm the store manager here at Gallery Nucleus, and I'm very excited to have you all with us today. I'd like to thank our 5 guests for taking the time out of their schedules to be with us this Saturday, and I'm sure we're all super excited to listen to their panel. We have cinematic directors Ben Dai, Jason Hill, and Doug Gregory. And we also have visual development artist Jung-Ah Lee and the main editor of the book, Matt Burns. And Matt will be the moderator of the panel today. And with that, I'd like to hand off the panel to Matt. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks for coming, everyone, and checking this out. We really appreciate it. I guess I'll just start, and we can introduce the other panelists a little bit. And so everybody, maybe when I call your name, you can just talk a little bit about what you do at Blizzard, maybe how long you've been there, anything you want to bring up. So I'll start with Jung-Ah, who is a visual development artist. But so what does that mean? What do you do on the cinematics and at Blizzard?
So hi everyone, I'm Jung-Ah Lee. I'm a visual development artist. I think I will call it visual development artist because concept art is kind of part of my job, and I also do all kind of stuff for related art for Blizzard. So that's why we're just overall visual development artist. I've been work for Blizzard almost 5 years so far, and mostly work on Overwatch cinematic, but also different cinematic, Diablo, World of Warcraft, but also when game team needs some concept art support, I'm going there to help them. So yeah, that's my work here, and yeah, nice to meet you all. Yep.
Super cool. Thank you. Yeah, and later, I'll pull up some of the concepts and stuff you've done. We can talk about those. So Ben Dai, what do you do?
That's a good question. What do I do? Hi, I'm Ben. I'm one of the directors, mainly working on Overwatch shorts. Pretty much started Blizzard when I was a young man. I've been here almost 20 years. This is my 20th years. So yay.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time. I pretty much grew up in Blizzard. Yeah, I started out as an animator, and then gradually it's such a small team back then, so we all had to wear different hats. So when I'm not animating on a show, they asked me to help out storyboard, and then the demand gets bigger and bigger, and eventually I was the only full-time storyboard artist. And then it gets even worse. So I mean, not worse, but there's even more work. So we had to pretty much build out a story team, and then eventually I was able to get an opportunity to direct cinematics for Blizzard. So here I am.
Super cool. And just I'm going to mention this in case it sparks any question ideas from people watching, but before Overwatch, you've worked on a lot of Overwatch stuff, but you worked on Starcraft, Warcraft, Diablo, right? On cinematic stuff for those.
Yeah, but back then I think everyone, was able to work on everything because there's only a few of us in the department. So yeah, I worked on Warcraft, the original Warcraft stuff. I directed some of the in-game Starcraft cinematics, and then pre-render as well.
Cool. Very cool. All right, let's jump over to Jason. Jason, you also have worked on a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, let's see. I've been with Blizzard for 16 plus years now, I think. So not as old as Ben. I'm definitely not as old as Ben yet, but yeah, we've worked on, I think, we've touched everything at this point. I think everything from Warcraft to Starcraft to Diablo to Overwatch. My primary stuff right now, I'm directing the in-game cinematics for Overwatch 2, but have directed the pre-rendered stuff in the past. And before that, I started off as a lighter and compositor, working on our pre-rendered pieces also before Blizzard, just worked in the film industry as a visual effects artist. That's the Cliff Notes version.
Okay, and Doug, like I'm just gonna like preempt you and mention something that's interesting, because like Jason and Ben and everybody are talking about their past as like visual effects and animators, and interesting, you have a lot of like illustration and painting experience in your past, right?
Yeah, so I started off in college as wanting to be a comic book artist and an illustrator, and that's what I left college to do. I dropped out after my second year and moved to New York and started working for Marvel back in the day, and then segued into doing a lot of Magic the Gathering art for about 16 years. So I was a freelancer for most of my life, and then eventually got an opportunity to work in-house at Wizards of the Coast as a concept artist on the Ravnica block for Magic the Gathering, and that led to a concept art position at NCSoft in Santa Monica, where I worked with people like Kevin Chen, who own the Concept Design Academy and things of that nature. A lot of the folks that went on to work at Marvel Studios as concept artists were the guys that I actually worked with when I was at NCSoft. Then we eventually got shut down as a concept house, moved to Red 5 Studios, and a lot of Red 5 Studios are the people that actually formed the key base of the Overwatch team, Bill Petros, Arnold Sang, Joe Peterson, people of that nature back in the day. So I got tricked into working for Blizzard by a friend of mine that had originally hired me for Magic the Gathering. He invited me down to have lunch. That lunch turned into a job interview that sounded so cool that I could not refuse. And actually I came on board as a art director on the trading card game that Blizzard originally did before Hearthstone kind of took that place. So I did that up until Hearthstone took off, and then I moved over to publishing, and that's how I kind of got more involved with Matt Burns here on day-to-day, working on the comics and novels and things of that nature, hiring cover illustrators and things of that sort. And then eventually I did a thing called The Burdens of Xiaohao, which was a 6-part sort of animated motion comic with Laurel Austin. And that was, 30 minutes of end-to-end story content that had a video component. And that led to us being kind of absorbed into the cinematics group. And from there, I kept doing things for World of Warcraft, like Lords of War, and then eventually got my first shot at 3D, which was the Sombra short for Overwatch. And that led to Doomfist for Overwatch, and then also the Echo short, and some new things that I'm working on now. And recently I directed the announcement piece for Diablo 4 by 3Day Con.
Super cool. Yeah, I just want to mention too, because it's interesting. In a lot of ways, like you see with Overwatch, these origin stories, like Doug just mentioned, Echo, and there's one that comes out for all of the heroes. It's interesting because the Burdens of Xiaohao was really like the start of that visual style that Blizzard now uses for across like almost all of the IPs, right? So it's interesting that you worked on that one, and then now you're working on stuff for Overwatch when there's like newer technology that we can use with those, and it's a cool evolution to see though.
Yeah, it's real quick, just to jump on that. So I was working on Xiaohao, and this is back at a time when, so the illustration team was across the street from where the cinematics team worked. So we didn't really know each other as entities. We were across the street. We were in our own little bubbles. So yeah, Xiaohao was being worked on under the kind of the illustration team and publishing team bubble. And then what was happening actually at the same time, concurrently, was folks were working on the Hearthstone, the very first Hearthstone cinematic, which was doing some 2.5D stuff. That was like Matthew Mead's kind of big dream gig there. And I think James McCoy was working on that. And so they were doing a 2.5D thing at the same time we were. We were just doing it with story and a super simple version of it. And then Cinematics is doing like the super awesome effects driven spectacular that turned into the original Hearthstone announcement.
Cool. And we can talk more about that kind of stuff later. Like, I just want to mention, just for context, a little bit about the books, and then we can jump into more questions that people have submitted. But you know, like, the reason we made these books is because when a cinematic comes out, you're kind of seeing this final product that has required, you know, months of work and like dozens and dozens of people working on. And so the purpose of these cinematic art of books is, like, you know, we get a chance to tell the story of how these cinematics are made, have interviews with some of the people that are involved in these different stages of production, because there's so many, you know, there's the animators, visual effects artists, you know, producers, editors, all kinds of people. And one of the other reasons is, as Jung talked about a little bit, there's a lot of art created for the cinematics that people don't actually end up seeing, because it's created, you know, to help guide the creation of the cinematics, but you're only seeing kind of the end result of that. So these books have a lot of that kind of concept art in it too. So just to give you all a little context about kind of our goal for these art books. But with that said, I'm going to jump into questions that were submitted. And I also want to say to everyone watching, if you think of another question, feel free to post it in the chat. And, you know, if we have time, we can try to get to those too. So feel free to do that. But yeah, I'll just start it off. And first question, I think you all can weigh in on this, but I know Jung-ah will have a lot to say. But the question is, what is the difference in approach between concept art for the cinematics versus the actual game? Does one have more freedom in design over the other?
Okay, I'll answer first. I don't say one has more freedom. I would say it's more about different purpose for design. So for game design, the most important thing is the gameplay side. The character need to be played. But for cinematic, I'll focus more about story and what is the situation and what is the mood. And that is the main thing. So yeah, that's a biggest different thing between cinematic and in-game design.
Cool. Actually, I want to pull up, like, because we're on the subject, I want to pull up some art really quick. So I'm going to share my screen. So yeah, this is Ash. So Ash and Bob, you during the creation of this cinematic that Jason directed, you were creating these different concepts for Ash. And the interesting thing about her was you were collaborating pretty closely with the game designers as well, because she was not yet a hero in the game. And so as you were concepting her, like, you were thinking about, like, okay, well, she may be in the game later, so you have to.
Yeah, Ash is just very unique thing that, like, I was very lucky that she became a playable character, but at the beginning we had no plan to make her as a playable character. She was one of just side character, very important side character for Mercury cinematic. And but when I just read her concept, I thought, like, oh my gosh, she's way too cool. Just, you know, be just as a side character. So Jason, you can help me, but yeah, we just talked that, hey, let's, you know, maybe, you never know, like, what happened later, but let's make her super cool. And I put like extra effort And I also consider thinking about, she's not a playable character, so I don't need to think about her like acting or anything else, but I also think about, you know, how she, you know, act, what about her art. Like I also think about gameplay side, so that's why it's not that hard to, you know, transfer her to a playable character. But yeah, Jason, yeah, you can help me here.
No, I think you hit it on the nose with so much, and that like we had hoped that she would be used for something else, like she would go into a comic book or something, or some kind of story. But you know, when we started this, yeah, absolutely, um, she was not designed, or the purpose of her was for the cinematic to be somebody from McCree to go up against. But during the evolution of the entire process, you know, we were falling in love with her before I think even, you know, they really started even to think about her as a game character. But the fact that the game team fell in love with her too, and everybody was like, oh, this is like, you know, they were also looking for another hero to serve a certain purposes that she actually kind of fell into nicely also. So yeah, it was a wonderful just kind of moment where it was like wasn't initially planned, but it worked out really well, and we just all kind of gave a lot of attention to her, and we had, I think we all kind of also all clicked on understanding who she was. Like we all were very everybody from the storyboard artists to when we're doing the concepts for her to, you know, animation, like everybody just got her. Like everybody's like, yep, I understand who she is. And I think that kind of showed through in the end.
Cool. All right, let me shut that down really quick and jump over to another question. Okay, so this one is which short was the hardest one to make? And I'd say, like, you know, maybe like there's always challenges that come up with each cinematic, right? So maybe if you all can remember one of those challenges that you kind of had to face and overcome, that might be interesting to talk about. And Ben, do you want to start? Sorry,
Sure.
calling you out.
No, it's fine. Well, I think I can't speak for all of us, but to me, you know, the one that I'm currently working on is probably the hardest to make currently. But looking back, I think you know, 0 Hour was it took a long time to make physically. You know, it's a bigger piece. It includes a lot of characters. We need to bring back some of the older characters that we showcase in previous years to kind of tie all the story together, and also to sort of set up something for the upcoming game. So I think that one for me, it took a while to solidify in terms of story, in terms of storyboards and animatics. It took a long time because there's just a lot of complicated actions that involve multiple heroes. You know, this is our sort of team assemble moment, so that all these character reintroduction of each of these favorite characters will need to have its own personality. So I think that took a long time, and plus at that time this is the most ambitious one that we have done so far in terms of budget and scale. It's taking place outside in the daylight in a city that's we have to build out that whole street. Yeah, it's a huge a project. Plus we made a ginormous robot, you know. So it was a lot of work, but I think looking back, we had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, that was really really quickly, just to mention it, it was like the culmination of, you know, a lot of the story threads we put in all the cinematics leading up to that one. So so that it was cool, like it had to accomplish a lot of different things, right? And it
Yeah.
did. Cool. Right, Jason,
You just and I hate to repeat Ben, and it's not helpful, but yeah, actually what I'm working on now is definitely with Overwatch 2 some of the most complex stuff for very much the same reasons. So many characters, so many plot points, so much so many moving parts. But I won't. I think more of a fun thing than what's the hardest cinematic is what in a cinematic took the longest from a sense of like from design to final, just exploring the space. And it was honestly McCree's pie, him eating pie took so long because sometimes it went too photoreal, sometimes it was a little too cartoony, sometimes it was a matter of like what's the Overwatch equivalent of food, or how do you make it feel like Overwatch. And so that just him cutting through the pie and the effects team and all the different work they did, the shaders and the lighting for it, just it was amazing. Something that on the page and on the storyboard is super simple, and you're like, oh, the big action stuff's going to be the hardest stuff. I think the pie actually is what.
And Jason, I think you might be bearing the lead a little bit. I think this is also the very first time that Young actually ever had to have apple pie, if I remember the story correctly.
I think it was. Yeah,
he might have had to redesign the apple pie after Laurel made her an apple pie. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. It was the big meeting room. We just talk about this apple pie concept, and at that time I'm from Korea, and I've never had apple pie before. So do I need to design apple pie? I've never had apple pie, and everyone in the meeting room was like, "What? Like, really? What? How come?" And then one of my previous coworker, actually baked an apple pie for me, so that was my first apple pie, and then there I make a concept for that. So yeah.
Funny story, just to kind of continue on that, is like our animators shoot a lot of reference for all sorts of stuff, and they wanted to shoot reference for apple, cutting it, what's it like to cut into a pie and stuff like that. And I've never seen so many animators get involved in a project so quickly because there was free pie, and it was just doing it over and over again. But it was funny when you actually go and you cut a pie, it just smashes. It just collapses on itself, and so that's not what we wanted. Like if the pie in the cinematic cuts more like, honestly, like a cheesecake, but it's more elegant looking and it looks more appealing than how a real pie would actually just smash. It's actually pretty gross if you actually have your camera on it and you're shooting it. But it was really funny watching animator after animator, even the animators not working on it, going, I think I need to figure out the reference for this. Just this is good for later, just to understand this. So yeah, a lot of apple pie was eaten.
That's amazing, guys. Yeah. I've got hopefully a quick one for you. So for me, my very first 3D piece was Sombra. So my very first 3D piece was the announcement piece for Sombra that was going to go live at BlizzCon, and so that had a lot of different terrifying aspects to it, for sure. Especially since the game team hadn't quite figured out everything she was going to be at that time. So in game design, you're kind of working on a character. I want to say maybe up until the game ships. You can kind of tweak things, change things, whatever else. But in a cinematic, you need to lock down, whatever your superhero is going to do, whether they're going to fly or jump or cause exploding things to happen. You need to lock that down pretty early on, because once you start making a cinematic, by and large, it's going to be one straight track the entire time. So Sombra, still being a character that they were figuring out a lot of during the making of the piece, wound up being a big challenge. And we actually went through maybe 3 or 4 different iterations of that cinematic, not simply because they hadn't figured out the character yet. It was also just us. And I want to shout out the entire studio and the writing teams on this. We don't tend to call quits on any script until we feel like we're narratively getting somewhere that hopefully affects you as an audience member. We will revisit things. On Ben's piece that he was talking about earlier, they scrapped the first, I want to say, 4 minutes of that piece at one point and restarted because they didn't feel like they had done the job yet at connecting, with the audience, connecting with the characters. It was the exact same thing on the Sombra piece. And, at one point, it was like all hands on deck. being all hands, being two storyboard artists, Mike Koizumi and Ted Boone-Vanikett, and myself and the writer, kind of just reimagining it in like a 2-week period after working on it for months and just arriving at something that didn't work. In 2 weeks, we reimagined it from the ground up, and we had an edit, and that eventually was, you know, what became the cinematic you now see. But it was going through all those missteps and miscalculations and frustrations and rewriting and staying up until 4 a.m, you know, trying to make something work and pound it into place. All that heartache, eventually you arrived at something that truly hits you. But it doesn't just happen by accident. It happens through a lot of pain. But it was a great experience.
It would have been easier if you had pie in the piece somewhere.
I had no pie.
True.
I had Sombra.
But it's true, Doug. I gotta echo that. Like a lot of our stuff is brute force in a way that we gotta get it done. And you know, the deadline was 2 weeks ago, and there's no shortcuts. We just have to work really hard. The whole team work really hard to get you guys the what's going to be on the final finishing, you know, product. So yeah,
But they're not going to move BlizzCon for us. Like
no.
we gotta, yeah. It's a release schedule, much like a movie, like a theatrical movie.
So, Junga, kind of same question for you, like in terms of something really challenging or hard. Maybe there was a particular concept that you were working on that was a big challenge.
Well, I kind of feel sorry for this to these 3 directors here, but as a concept artist, I don't need to take care of all the, you know, technical issues or budget or any, you know, story plot. When I just get concept, I will just, you know, do the designs and how about this, how about that, and they will say yes or no. So and for Overwatch concept, I don't really have any, you know, specific, you know, concept that really have a hard time to design, because I am a huge fan of Overwatch. I played that game a lot, and just naturally I kind of know like what is the Overwatch style, what should the character should be, something like that. So I might have a favorite. It's really hard to pick favorite, but I don't think like specific, you know, thing to really hard to design. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So since we're talking, there was a question that just came up in the chat about Diva, and the question is, since you were from Korea, did you have any special input in the Diva cinematic to create a futuristic Busan? And I would even add to that, like, you know, what kinds of work did you do on Diva, just with like the design of her and the props and like her team and stuff like that?
Ben, you can help me, but I especially very confident to design a Diva cinematic, because I'm the one just came from Korea, and I think I know the Korea the most rest of my teammate. So yeah, I just naturally did that. I designed the Diva these pages, new Diva's outfit, and also Taehyun, which is her friend. Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, when I just heard his concept, I just no hesitate, just draw him, and everyone think, okay, that's Taehyun. Then you can help me, you can deny.
It's all wrong. No, just kidding. It's Jung is awesome. She she knew the Overwatch style like the back of her hand. So the hardest part of working with Jung is to pick and choose all the different variety of stuff that she gave us. You know, like if you look at this page right here, I think, you know, we just have a hard time trying to choose which concept to use, and they're all going to work. It just matter of like personal choices that come down to it. There's like a jacket story behind this too, right, Jong-un? Like you designed this jacket, and then they actually made a jacket for for one of the product.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that's, you also did the poster too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we should talk about that, because Jonggan just likes to draw. She's a pure artist. Like sometimes she just want to draw for fun. That's weird, right? Draw for fun. Yeah. but one day she drew a picture of May, and then she put it up the wall as a joke, like it was I don't know if you guys remember the movie The Martian, where the poster is bring him home, I forget the main character's
Bring
name.
him home. I
Bring
think,
him
yeah.
home, right? It
Yeah.
was him in this parka looking desperate. So she drew a very similar picture of May, and then I forgot the title, the caption that you put, like bring her home
Bring
or
her
help
home,
her,
yeah.
bring her home.
Yeah.
And then I think everyone loved it, and so somebody printed out a full-size poster, and then they hung it up on the wall in the cubicles where she worked. And then one day I was walking by, I was like, "Hey, did you do this?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "We're gonna make that into a poster." And that sort of become our tradition. Like every time we finish a project, we to kind of celebrate, because we make so many of these nowadays. We want to celebrate after each project is done. Junggan is always the one that's creating a poster for all the teams to kind of enjoy. She also did the Diva one.
I'm gonna
That's cool.
I'm gonna totally embarrass her now and just say Jean just does such a phenomenal job of giving you options, like the amount of different designs for Ash and costume designs, and if I remember correctly, you come from a fashion background, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it clearly showed, and it was just like everything was just looks so cool. You're like, you have just a hard time choosing. It's like I
Oh
can
my
make
God.
I can make like 10 different cinematics here of this character, and they would all be cool. So like hats off, props props to you. It's fantastic work.
Thank you. I think I got like the most compliment right now because usually when I give them option, they were like, no. when I heard no, I feel like very rejected. But yeah, thank you.
All right. Let me jump over to another question. So here's one, like, I think from someone who's curious about, what are the most important skills or characteristics that a cinematic director or visual development artist should have. So, like maybe somebody who's looking to get into the industry in these roles, like what are some of the main characteristics you all feel like are
Can I start on that one?
Do it, yes.
I'm going to say for not only the artists who work with the directors, but the directors and working with everybody else, patience and ability to take feedback. That's huge. It might not seem huge, but it really is huge. Your ability to take criticism and hear what's wrong with your story or your drawing or whatever else. It's a skill that we don't really get taught in school. I went to art school, and we pretty much had to defend our pieces when we hung them on the wall, our assignments, kind of a thing. And defending our work is one thing, and that's a good skill to have. It's an amazing skill to have and understand why you made the choices you made. But then it's also an amazing skill to be able to go, yeah, okay, I made that choice for a reason. But either it's not connecting, or it's not what the team wants, or it's not what the story needs, and being able to let those things go. And so I remember early on, that understanding hit me one day, that I get paid to some degree for the ideas that I have, but I probably am really getting paid to let go of those ideas more than anything, and figuring out another way to do it, because that's the reality of what we work in. It's really about building an idea with a team of people and being willing to let go of just maybe the one focused way you see something, and allowing other people to participate, and then also hit a target for somebody else, which is, we're always in partnership with the game team and trying to achieve a vision that glorifies, what they're trying to do in their overall story. So I think that flexibility is probably the number one component you have to have after having skills.
Just to add on to that, because I completely agree with what Doug just said, but I think it's not only the ability to let go of ideas, but the ability to pivot and quickly come up with new ideas fast that still work within the confines of whatever the production is. Whether you still have a deadline, you still have a schedule, you still have whatever that is, but it's like, okay, let go of that idea, no matter how much you loved it, and still come up with something else that everybody can rally behind. And that in itself is an art that takes practice for the most part.
Yeah, and then you have to believe in those ideas, because you're the one who's gonna shepherd those ideas all the way through, and it's gonna have to stand up against the test of time, against the test of critiques. You're gonna have to, like Doug say, they don't teach you these skills in school or anywhere. It's just come from experience. You have to have a thick skin. If you don't, you're gonna feel very bad after every single story meetings or every review with the executives, because they're gonna, basically you're gonna have to show your baby to everybody, and everyone have an opinion, whether it's right or wrong. I think overall, I think most of the opinions and critique I gotten over the year all end up being really constructive criticism, which really help the piece along the way. But when you're so close to something, you can't see it, you get a little bit of tunnel vision. All right, so you're thinking whatever you had in your mind is the greatest thing ever, until it puts it on page, you put it on an animatic, and then you see it, and then people have different interpretation of it too. So yeah, and also a good communicator, because you have to be able to communicate your idea to artists like Jong Un, and storyboard artists and animators. If you can't say it, sometimes you can act it out, but it's so much better if you're able to kind of communicate what's in your head to the artist, so they can help you create those images.
And the critiques aren't personal. Like the critiques that we get on our pieces, that when we have to start over or do something, that's not personal. That's about making it better. And it's the same when we give. I think when directors giving notes, we're not giving notes because we're like, that's awful or anything. No, actually, that's really cool. What I was just saying about some of the stuff that Chang Han does, like, this is so much like, but there's so much cool stuff here. It's about getting to the core of like, what is the best of all these ideas, and what can we do to pivot left or right to make sure it still aligns with whatever the core of the story is, or the core of the character, and just keeping focus on that, and just being able to like kind of strip everything else away. I think as directors, what we're blessed with is the ability to, we can get into the minutia, we can get into the micro if people want us to. It's better for us to look at the macro. It's much better for us to look at a high level, because we have so many talented artists, writers, concept animators, modelers, that bring so much to the table for us. They bring ideas that we're not going to think of everything on our own. God, no, I'm not that smart. But so that's why we have this great team around us to help. And so it is also about being open to not being so rigid of like, it has to be this. When something comes in from the side, you can look at it and go, that's not what I was thinking, but it's really cool and it's not wrong, and it totally works with the story or whatever it is. So it's also being able to absorb that content too.
I also totally agree. Same page with them. I know they have like more bigger thing to pursue and let go and everything. But as an artist too, I'm not only work with my team, like cinematic team, our art director, but also work with game team. And sometimes we all agree in our team, we all agree we like this version, but when we show the same concept to game team, they might think something different. So always need to listen and collaborate with everyone. That's really important thing. Also, I can add, as an artist, this is my first role as a visual development artist, and not just concept artist. In Blizzard, to me, it's we're here for Overwatch right now, but I not only work for Overwatch, I work for Diablo, sometimes World of Warcraft. One day I work for Overwatch, next day I might work for Diablo, which is complete different style, and I need to switch my brain for each project, and that is really kind of challenging to me as a visual development artist here.
Well, thank you.
And then one last thing on that, though, it is totally okay, though, if in your own head you are completely frustrated by the feedback that you got, or don't agree with it, or don't like it, and want to say something about it, whatever else. I think that's completely human. I mean, I come out of, there is no meeting I go into where I show something and I don't get notes on it. And I'll agree with those notes or disagree with those notes, or be like, I can't believe I got that note. And then 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh man, that's a really good note. You know, so I think it's also okay to accept the fact that you can be frustrated by all those things. I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but just understand, like what Jason was saying, it's all coming from a place of people are trying to help you communicate your idea better, or the grander idea better. So if they're giving a note, it may not be the specific of the note, as Ed Catmull said in his book on story. It might just be, don't change it based on the one thing that was said. Try and discover what was underlying that note, why something in your piece wasn't connecting, or you know, what's another way you can attack that same idea that doesn't set off, you know, the wrong tone in the show.
And the one other thing, sorry, we're gonna keep going on this one. The one other thing I will add to this that we've really kind of learned over time is, what's the note behind the note? And a lot of times we'll get a note that doesn't quite make sense, or you're like, that just doesn't, I'm not jiving to what. So it's a matter of kind of digging into that and going, what is it that's really like bumping this person or isn't working? And sometimes it's a really simple fix. So it's instead of like, oh, we got to tear the whole thing apart, it's like, oh, just turn left when instead of turning right, or, you know, move the camera a little bit. So there's a lot of just critical analytical thinking and just kind of trying to understand, you know, there's a bit of being like psychology in there too, I guess, of understanding people and their needs.
Yeah, thank you. Those were all like really insightful answers. And I think for anyone here who's listening, who's like getting into the industry, like it's really good advice, because they're kind of like things that you learn through years of experience, you know, so it's good to keep in mind. So I'm going to jump over to a question in the chat that's like the timeless question of, you know, how do you overcome artist block or writer's block, you know, creative block? And it kind of ties into like some of the stuff you all were just talking about, where you get notes or something's not working perhaps, and you know, what do you do to kind of overcome those voids and to just find the ideas to solve problems?
I'll take that at least as a start. I would just say your team is massive, especially at Blizzard. I mean, I came from working, you know, alone in a studio where, for the most part, if I couldn't figure out what to do on the white page, I was kind of done, you know. So you start to network really quickly. You know, when I was alone at home, the thing we do, and what we're doing a lot more of now, is probably having chat with friends. But when I started talking to friends, we had fax machines. So we'd send each other sketches and go, is this okay? Is that okay? Eventually that turned into JPEGs on the computer. And now at Blizzard, one of the things that I adore about working as part of a team is that I'd never had, you know, at home alone in my studio, is the fact that I really do have just so many people I can go and talk to, and don't be afraid to go and talk to them. I can get a note in a meeting and not know how to address it, get together with the storyboard team, and I'm like, Mike, Ted, I don't know what we're going to do with this note. And we can walk out of that meeting half hour later with totally a plan of attack. So it's not always on you to solve it. It is on you to be open, as we've said in the previous question, to be open to hearing solutions, because they're actually just lying all around you if you're open to the idea. But aside from that, obviously go see movies and read books and look at pictures and everything. All those things fill up the well as well. But the nice thing is that the human resources become the most valuable to me.
I have that is a great question, because it happens to everybody, no matter what. And to Doug's point, we have so many talented people around us who love chipping in. So that anybody's more than willing to kind of throw ideas. Sometimes we have too many ideas, but you know, what I found is, you have to figure out if you're just working on with just yourself, you need to find out a way to reset your compass and reset kind of how you are looking at the problem or looking at what you're trying to do. Is like, what do I want to make? And I actually back in college years ago, in the before time, the long ago, I actually had great advice from one instructor. And when you have a piece of white paper, and we'll just talk about this for illustrators, when you have a piece of white paper and you start to draw, it can be intimidating. Like, where do I even start? It's like, I don't even know how to start. It's a perfect piece of white paper. And he would have us crumple the paper and then flatten it out. And the white piece of paper then was not perfect anymore. It had crumple lines and all that. And it instantly released something in your head where you're like, I'm not looking at it as such a big challenge, or this is, oh my God, what is this? How do I get around this? It's like, oh, it's a little more freeing and flowing, and I can just kind of get in there and not worry about it, and I can experiment and just try a bunch of different things. And usually my first idea isn't the idea I'm going to land on. It's, as a matter of fact, I usually throw out my first idea pretty quickly because I'm like, that's probably the obvious idea, and move past that. So it's, when I say resetting your compass, it's kind of looking at it like, how can I look at this problem, or I'm trying to create something, or I don't know what to draw, or I don't know what to, what story to tell, or anything like that. It's kind of like, maybe you're forcing yourself down a particular road too much. And just to Doug's point or whatever, maybe it's about reading a different book, or looking at a movie or a TV show, or just going on a walk. The amount of ideas I come back from just walking my dog, just refresh my brain. And so I know they sound a little simple, but it works. It really does work. And if that doesn't work, then yeah, look for allies in the field. Look for people that you can rely on that have good ideas too.
Yeah, I think that's something that I do all the time. Is I walk away from the project if I'm stuck. I don't. It doesn't help when you're staring at the same thing for weeks and weeks, and then now you're trying to look at it in a fresher way. You can't do that. So I will force myself sometimes not to look at certain things for a certain amount of time. Like I don't look at anything work related, for example, on the weekend, to kind of reset myself, and then comes Monday, I'm gonna look at it fresh with a brand new idea, or maybe hopefully something else comes up. And also, this is kind of cliche, right? You look at a project or look at a painting or something, you flip it to the opposite side, and then you see what was wrong with the painting. I think that same analogy could be used for pretty much everything. I'm not saying you should watch your movie backwards to see see if you can come up with something better, but you should approach it in a different, fresh set of eyes, and to kind of really reset yourself.
I'm the same. I just want to mention a little bit more about the previous question, that it's really interesting because you guys talk about note and accept the thing, but you guys, these director guys are the one who give me the note, and I need to accept that thing, and sometimes that makes me frustrated, or like make me block, so make me go out for walking, and think about need to make my my brain fresh, something like that. So yeah, just to mention that was really interested. Yeah, I'm the same. I just go out for a walk, fresh my brain, and also the same that I just ask my coworker. One thing is really amazing working for Blizzard is my all artist friends are really like amazing, talented people. So whenever I feel like, what is the problem block, I just grab them, anyone, because they are all great. So I just grab them and just ask that, what do you think? And yeah, that I get idea.
Also, I think to add to that, I think I can speak for all of us. We have a group of coworker colleagues that we trust. We understand their opinions. We cherish their opinions, and we know that they don't hold back on opinions. So they'll give us the honest and truth rather than being agreeable. Or like a lot of time I'll show something to someone, they'll go, yeah, that's great, that's awesome, but it's not really helping me kind of find out what's wrong with it. So I have a group of trusted, colleagues who I often show stuff to them, and they'll give me honest feedback. A lot of time these are harsh feedback. These people that I know for, like, I'm working at Blizzard, I know most of them for almost 20 years. So they're not going to sugarcoat anything. It's going to be very blunt and very candid. I think that's the way to go. Is as part of your skill set, you have a thick skin, so you can take some of the quote unquote verbal abusements, but really these are the gems. These are the ones that really help you sort of figure out what is wrong with the piece that you're working on, or try to help you solve that problem.
And it's never mean. I mean, we're mean to Ben. Ben, we're a little mean
Always.
too.
Yeah.
But it's honesty and being okay with that, and because we can all be honest with each other and again, to go back, it's the goal of making everything better, even projects we're not working on. That's when I think we're like, okay, we're open to it, and just being open is huge.
Mhm.
Cool. That's all really good advice too. We are fortunate that we have the people around us are working on different projects, and they're always, they always make themselves available to check something out or talk with you about a problem. So
How
that's
about
super
you,
cool
Matt?
too.
How about you, Matt? What about you? What's
Yeah.
your problem? Like
Right.
Matt. By the way,
Nice.
Matt is our writer, and he also worked with me, collaborate with me on Diva. So he's
a
the writer.
phenomenal writer, and I would love to know how you get over writer's block.
Yeah.
Thanks.
How do you deal with notes from the directors?
Yeah. How do you deal with us?
We got a bunch of bad guys in here.
Yeah, I just get angry. No, I mean, like, you were talking earlier about feeling frustrated, and yeah, like that's a human reaction to receiving notes about something or criticism, right? And then I think it was Jason or Doug, you mentioned separately, like, patience, and I think that's super important, because your like initial reaction to something is usually always like just based in pure emotion and not in any kind of like logic or thought. So kind of having the patience to like just like sit on something and like think about it for a while is super important. And then in terms of like writer's block, I think I would just echo what everyone else says. Like, I think talking to people about an issue or a problem, or like a creative problem you're facing, is always really helpful, because sometimes it's not that what that other person says is the answer, but what they say like causes you to think of an entirely different solution that will end up working. So it's more just about the idea of like, let's talk creatively about something, and in talking and saying things out loud, you find a solution. Because that's the other important thing, is like, you can write all day long by yourself, but saying it out loud, talking to someone, it just activates a different part of your brain, and I think it helps you find like new pathways to a solution. So
Yeah, just recently on a script that we were working on for another IP, Matt came in and actually gave feedback along with a couple of other writers on things. And we just kind of got a roundtable going for about a week and a half, I guess, wasn't it, Matt? Week and a half, 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's like 2 weeks.
Yeah, and just kind of spinning or throwing the ball around with each other for those 2 weeks really unlocked quite a bit for us. I mean, we chased a lot of different versions of the dialogue in that script. But the advancements we made, we may have gotten there eventually, but I think it really is that thing of, you can do it all kind of on your own when you want to, and you could probably get there, and it may take you 6 months, but then, relying on the resources around you, having the smart people around you that can give you a fresh perspective, we got there in 2 weeks rather than 6 months. And that's the value of people,
Yeah, I guess one last thing I'll just add to that, and I'm probably repeating what you all already said, but it's like like one of the big values of talking to people who are not involved in the project you're working on is that they will see it with fresh eyes. And so when you've been working on something for like weeks or months even, you're sort of like locked in to these certain ideas. So even when you're trying to rewrite something, maybe you're just changing the words, but the issue is more like the fundamental concept, but you can't see that because you've been so close to it. So having someone who's not involved in your project look at it, they will see it completely differently from how you see it, and usually that's really valuable. So
it really is.
Cool. Well, let me change gears a little bit and ask a technical question. And for any of you on the panel, like you don't all have to chime in on this because it's kind of specific, but if any of you have had experience with this, the question is, how are crowds and NPCs in the cinematics created? Is there a program that auto-generates them, or do they need to be designed individually?
Ben, you want to run with this one?
No, there's no magic button that we push to go create crowd. It's all designed individually. There's shortcuts. As concept artists like Jung Pai can tell you, like we design, let's say we had to design a crowd of, let's say 100 people. We'll do like a crowd. We'll pick out maybe like 5, 6, really depends on the budget and how much time we have. We pick out maybe 4 or 5 sort of full costume, we call it, and then we make them modular. Make them modular. We call it the Lego blocks approach, or a modular approach. Basically, you design a character full on with shoes, pants, jacket and whatnot, and undershirt, and then basically from there you start just playing with different combinations of clothing to create another character, for example. So once you have 5 or 6 of these characters to fully build out, you can make, not infinite, but you get a larger number of different people by just doing different combinations. And then you mix the female and the male, and then you scale the size larger and smaller, and then you get a variety of crowd, in your shots. And usually they're in the background, so they can be a little bit more forgiving. Go ahead,
Hey,
Doug.
Ben, you were so Ben shared a room for the longest time with one of the other directors, Jeremiah Johnson, and Ben and JJ, as we call them, did the earliest Overwatch episodes. And I know that there was the Widowmaker Tracer episode, and we were all operating under really pretty tight budgets early on because we were trying to get a set number of shorts out. And I want to say that there was a story about JJ's crowd, like the crowd that went to go see Mandata speak, that kind of thing was, I don't know if you remember any of that, but I thought there was a whole thing of like, did they not create the legs on that crowd, or there was something about that they had to do something in a trick. There was a gag that was kind of used to get through that crowd. Jason, does that sound familiar to you at all?
I think you're making it up completely.
Oh.
No, I do remember. I don't remember the leg thing, which would be awesome.
Yeah.
Now I have to go back and look for that, but I do remember that was. We stay away from crowds a lot because
there was a big cheat that was being used on it. And
maybe that was the reason why we stopped putting crowds.
Crowds. What's interesting to Ben's point is like so much of it is about camera angle, like hiding it, and the amount of illusion you can get just through sound design. You can make a small group feel like a large group. So there's all sorts of just tricks of cinematography to make it feel bigger than it actually is in some cases.
Lens choice is your friend. It's all long lenses. Yeah. There's 3 people on a long lens.
Yeah, I mean, like it's very, when we are discussing like writing scripts and stuff in the script stage, usually the producer will flag those pages where someone's, for example, Matt will write, there's a huge crowd,
there's a giant crowd
of protests.
Yeah. He didn't, but it could happen, right? And then it's a story calls for it. and what's cool about these shorts is we were able to use some of the assets that we created. So the first 4 created a certain amount, generated a certain amount of assets, and then hopefully in the next group of shorts, we were able to reuse something from the first 4. I say that, but we haven't done it so far, so maybe one day we will. The whole idea of like bringing for the 0 hour, the whole idea of bringing like Genji and Reinhardt and Brigitte, all these people back to the fold is so that on paper we're like, we had these characters, let's reuse them, but of course when they show up they're all wearing different clothing. Again, it all started with maybe we're like, oh, that'd be cool if we put a nice cool like urban outfit for Genji. Once that you open the floodgate, everything sort of just like, oh, let's redesign everyone, let's put new costume for Winston and Tracers and Mei. So it's a big headache for a producer try to juggle all of that stuff. So big props for them. But yeah, exactly. Now everyone looks different.
and it's always it's always a challenge too if you're going to put characters in the uniforms. I know on the Sombra piece they actually wanted to use the winter uniforms for Reaper and Widowmaker. They're white kind of snow outfits. Which was a challenge in the sense that at that time we had only, I think, really started implementing those sorts of ideas in the game. So there was a problem of like, man, you're going to have Batman and Wonder Woman, so to speak, dressed in costumes you've never seen them in before. This might be a little weird and actually slow down the storytelling because you're going to have to do that mental adjust of 2 of the characters don't look like the people you say they're supposed to be. So we wound up going back to their primary costume designs because it communicated quicker.
To go back to Ben's thing, using a recipe system, we call it recipe system. Actually, that term I think actually comes from the game world of taking different tops with different bottoms and different hairstyles and different, how can you take 5 different shirts and 5 different pairs of pants? How many combinations can you get? And you can get really something that looks, again, larger than it actually is. But as far as an animation standpoint, our animators pride themselves on hand animating as much as possible. I think, and somebody correct me, and this could be totally blasphemy. I think there was a one Warcraft at least that we used a little mocap, but just for some of the crowds for the very far background stuff. Very far background, because all of these worlds have a very unique animation style. The animation of the characters in WoW is not the same as the animation style in Overwatch. And so also just how a human works and reacts, a normal human in a mocap suit isn't going to look quite right in Overwatch. So we'd have to go and clean that up anyway. So we have to be really smart about how we do crowds, no matter what. There is unfortunately no magic shortcut, at least that we've found so far.
Yeah.
I want to add, not about crowds specifically, but something I think Doug mentioned about the outfits and costumes. Let me share my screen. So yeah, it's a good point from Doug. Like a lot of times when you're seeing heroes you don't know well, you don't want to like put them in a different outfit in the pre-rendered cinematics. But interestingly, the origin stories for all these heroes are kind of a cool and fun way to show them either at different stages of their life, so they look a little different, or in different roles. So like with Ashe, that Jason, you directed this one, you kind of like see her evolution, her visual look, not only in age, but like how her hair is, how she's dressed. So these origin stories allow you to do that, right?
Yeah, and specifically for Ashe, for me, and I think I've said this before, not here, but for Ashe, her final outfit isn't a costume. Like, it's not a superhero outfit. It's not what Tracer puts on, or it's not Reinhardt in his armor. It's what she's wearing right now, and that outfit evolves over time and changes. So that's what's I think was great about Ashe, and it felt a little freeing. If you actually watch the 2.5D piece of Ashe, even the one on the left right here, this little image here, her look evolves through every shot to get to her final look that we know her as, the outfit that she plays in the game. So like her, she gets more of the outfit, her hair starts to get shorter, the hat, there's certain things like the gun is always consistent and whatnot, but yeah, it is fun to be able to, for specific characters, at least the ones that we can, show an evolution of the character. I think you'd see it like, and this isn't canon by any stretch of the imagination, but a Reinhardt one might show him with earlier forms of Crusader armor that evolved over time till you get to what we're used to. So
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Like I think we as filmmakers would love to sort of create these moments where we see our character outside of their normal outfits. It really just come down to like budget and the resources that we're gonna have. Oftentimes when we start doing a cinematic, they tell us like, okay, here's your budget, basically the sandbox that we get to kind of play in with. You get this hero character, you get a certain amount of secondary characters, and then we say, hey, our hero, like for example with May, we knew that we want to show two states, her sort of pajama state and also the Arctic Echo Watch outfit that wasn't in the game. That's so that will basically take up a certain amount of budget. So it's sort of a give and take. You have what our producer would like to say is the popsicle stick method. Like you have 10 popsicle sticks. Each one of these will cost me one of these sticks. So it's really up to us, the directors, to kind of sort of spend it the way we want it. And then you have that pressure of like, oh, am I gonna lose something later on by overcommitting to like couple of outfits, right? Like, but what's important? Is it important to the story? Is it important to kind of showcase the characters? If it is, then we just have to go ahead and spend that budget.
Jason, I think I just learned something. I just learned that Ben gets 10 popsicle sticks while you and I only get 5.
That's garbage. Where did that happen? Wait, you get 5?
Well, for you get 3.
Yeah, it is very much. We say it all the time in our productions of determining what is the thing that we're going to fall on our sword for, and it's like, what is the one or two things in this cinematic that are like so crucial to like, what is the core, what is the nucleus, what is the one thing that this story is built around, and that's the thing that we protect, and that's when we can go, okay, so we don't need there's, I don't know, 6-7 cups on the screen. Okay, I'll take 3 of those if it means I can get something else. So it's a bargaining, but as directors, it's still your job to kind of go back and go, what is the core of this, and looking at the big picture and kind of going, okay, nobody's gonna know if there was 7 cups when there's only 5.
Oh, Jason, they'll know there's more than.
Ben, you know, but
now they know.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I just wanted to talk about these dogs. And there's some there's dog in the Ash one too, but because we were chatting about this earlier, and just like a fun story. If everyone can see this mug with the dogs on it, Ben or Chunga, do you want to talk about that? Like what are these dogs?
Nah, these are actually my dogs. You try to put something personal into like the film that you make. So I have 2 very cute dogs, and they're very important to me. And then so one day we were discussing like, well, what should we put on the cups? And then there's the murder cubs, there's the squid looking thing, and there's a lot of stuff that we can use from the game, but I really want to incorporate my dog in there. So Jong-an actually say, oh, just send me some pictures of your dog, and I'll sneak it in. So we snuck my dogs into the cinematics.
But to go so here's where I get in trouble. So once my wife found out that you got to do that, then she's like, well, when are you going to put our dog in something?
Let me find that one.
And so we found it's nothing that like we're like, it has to happen. If we just find like fun little spots that we can put it in, and poor Ash is having her birthday alone because her parents are off hanging out with my dog. So
wow.
So
wow.
That's where we find, we try and find little moments for to make things personal also, and have some fun while we're doing it. Well, we're having fun all the time, but
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm sure Jung-an sneak all sorts of stuff into our cinematic. I just haven't found them yet.
Just haven't found it yet.
Yeah, that happens actually quite often, that when we design some side character and we think about one of our coworker and then let's make this character like him or something. So I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
for the Reinhardt one,
Yes.
we made one soldier as our coworker, and I just asked him, hey, give me some photo of you, and then I just draw him, and yeah.
Yeah, it was
Aren't there?
it was
There's two people in there.
yeah,
Aren't there?
so
Yeah,
there's two soldiers that's Reinhardt's supposed to be part of Reinhardt's team that he's supposed to protect. Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah.
So the one on the right, the shorter one, is our CG Soup, Shimon Cohen. He's been working with me ever since Starcraft days. So we had he's we worked together as a team for almost 5 years. And then so one day we're sitting in the daily room, we're like, hey, it'll be kind of cool if we just put your face on one of the soldiers. And then the guy on the left, the taller one, is Stig Haskell, which, funny story is, me and him, we started the same day 20 years ago. I started first. I showed up early, but then no one's there, so I left and came back, and then he said he started first, but it's not true. But anyways, he is he's also represented in there. He's our rigging supervisor.
It sounds like a twins story, like when twins are born. It's like, okay, I was born
Yeah, totally.
10 seconds before you were.
Well, we put Jeff Kaplan in the Ash 2.5D origin piece too, in that image that you had up just a couple minutes ago of Ash walking out of the police station on the wanted poster.
Oops. Yeah, let me zoom in. So over.
It's in the
here,
higher
right?
in the higher res version, it's Jeff Kaplan. So I guess he's canon in Overwatch now. I guess he's officially.
And he's wanted, yeah.
Yeah, the guy on the left is actually Jeff Chamberlain. He's our basically our VP of story and franchise development. So they're both canon characters, but they're both wanted too. So in Overwatch. So again, it's just kind of like, where can we have some fun that doesn't distract from the story? That's the important thing, though. Is we don't want it to be something that everybody's like, it's Jeff Kaplan. That doesn't that doesn't help.
It's always fun to hide, those Easter eggs. It's kind of like a Blizzard tradition, almost, I would say, from some of the original games. There's like things hidden in there, and it's fun. Okay, I'm gonna take another question from the chat, and this one's pretty interesting. It's, how do you know when the piece you're working on is done? Because it's very easy to keep adding new layers or details or coming up with new ideas. So how do you know it's done?
Everybody's heard the quote about pieces they don't get finished, they escape.
Yeah. Ian McCaig, the concept artist Ian McCaig, had one of my favorite quotes. Is Ian, how do you know when your drawing is done or your concept is done? And he says, probably about 5 to 10 minutes after I've messed it all up. Like I've just gone too far. So keep everything on layers.
Yeah, like I think for us, it's when the producer, take it away from you and say you can't work on it when there's no one working on it. When everyone's like, we're gonna put our pencils down, we're gonna log out of our computers, that's when it's done.
We do. I mean, it goes back to elementary school, but we do say pencils down. It's like, for different departments, it's like, but we'll work as hard as we can and get as much as we can out of it. But
no, but the funny thing is, sometimes we're like, it's done, and then a day later, we have a group of artists who does our QCs, quality controls. They'll look at stuff frame by frame, with a magnifying glass, right? Like they'll look at it and go, hey, Ben, they'll send us our QC reports, and sometimes read them. They're so detailed. A couple of pixels here, got something. So oftentimes we try to hit all these QC nodes as much as we can. So once in a while you get a note that's basically like, oh man, I can't believe we missed it. Can we open this up again? And can we just do that? And then artists will do that just because they're like, dude, we want to have this project, this piece that's they're proud of, knowing there's a tiny imperfection really really bothers them. So they'll volunteer to do it, So I have this story about 0 Hour that I'll tell to people and often. So basically when the piece are done, we call a timing lock. Basically we lock timing. There's no more changes. We cannot change the length of it, especially when you are doing music and you're doing sound effects. Everything is basically done so that the composer can do the final touch and then make the music edit, and then we go to the mix room and then we mix it, and that's a very expensive and time consuming process. So when I was mixing 0 Hours, I got a call from my animation supervisor, Hunter, and then he's like, "Hey, I was looking at the edit and I haven't seen it for a couple of weeks, and now I'm watching it again. I feel like you should really hold on the last shot just a little bit longer, maybe 10, 20 or 20 frames. I can have a guy do it really quickly, and then it'll be done." And then I said to Hunter, like, "Do you know where I am? I'm mixing at this point. We're done." So he's like, no problem. Just letting you know, putting it out there, but that's cool. So long story short, like 2 days before we wrapped, and then I'm sitting, it's done. The mix is done. We're looking at the piece, and then Jeff Chamberlain, which is our VP, creative director, our boss, turned over. He's like, I really wish at the end there's just a little bit more. Like it felt like you cut short. And I'm like, I knew it. Because Hunter just called me like a day ago saying that we should hold for 10 more frames. And then he's like, yeah, we should do that. So I called him back. I was like, hey, Hunter, remember that thing that you're suggesting to yesterday or 2 days ago? You think you can do that? So and we're on the way coming back from the mixing. We're on the airport, so I have to call my producers, and then he was yelling at me that, you crazy, I can't believe you're doing that. And then but eventually he's like, yeah, you're right, you'll play better. And then because the music it just so happened that the music at that point will have a little bit at the end, so it all worked out. But it was one of those things that they basically, we finished the project and then we open it up again, and then we fix something at the very basically the very last moment. So yeah, to answer your question in short, until everyone says you cannot touch the project anymore. And
Doug, he gets to do that because he has 10 popsicle sticks.
Oh,
That's
And
right.
he
That's
saved
right.
one.
I had one saved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you did mention the producer, who I'm assuming probably was Kevin on that show. It's also pretty important that you have a producer that their main job is to protect the show and make sure everything gets done in time, for sure. But it's also super important that they have a vested interest in the creative nature of the show and are bought into the creative vision of the show and feel co-ownership. Because yes, their job is to make sure that we don't overspend, but you also want them to be a creative partner and collaborator with you. Because Kevin is definitely one of those guys that when you come back with something and you're like, man, it's going to make the show better, he'll be able to kind of take that in, look at it objectively and go, man, you know what, you're absolutely right. On Sombra, several times, we got into a kind of a sticky jam financially, and he was absolutely able to make something work for us because he knew it was going to make a better episode. So definitely shout out to the producers and the ones that are there for you as creative partners and in lockstep with you in terms of taking that journey with you.
Yeah, and all the artists who worked on these pieces, I felt like they're all really invested in the whatever it is that they're doing, every steps of the production. Really felt like they call it their own, right? I walked down the hallway back when we were still in the office pre-pandemic, and then I constantly had people stopping me and then asking, hey, like that show that you're working on, this shot, what if they're pitching me ideas. Some of them, I have to tell them no, because it's either it's beyond, that boat has been sailed a long time ago, or it doesn't fit the story. But once in a while, you get really good gems out of those, where you actually can take that idea and incorporate it into the piece, because they are right, and they do have a point. So yeah, it's great.
Just to add one little, to go back to the kind of the original question of how do you know when the piece is actually done. Before I even worked at Blizzard, when I was working in visual effects, I specifically remember working on one shot for a movie, and I was working on one little side of it, trying to get a matte, perfectly clean matte on a tree, blah blah blah, because it's got to look great, blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm focusing so much on that, and the supervisor finally came to look at the shot, and he's like, "Yeah, that's great, you're doing that, but we've all heard this, like, if the audience is looking at this tree and not this giant alien creature in the middle of the shot, we've totally failed as storytellers." So as directors, we also have to know to kind of like, when is it done? What is also the core story element of whatever it is you're working on, the shot, the moment, the scene. And it's about making sure that you don't have blinders in the wrong direction. And so, yeah, it's very easy to keep working on stuff, but when you step back and look at the piece, is it telling what you want to tell, or are you just adding to add? And so it's finding that balance. Yeah, you can keep adding to something forever, and it might get better and better, but at some point, I think you get diminishing returns also. So how much energy, time, money are you spending on something that will somebody actually notice? So
yeah, and as a character designer and concept artist, I imagine you are faced with the same thing. At some point, you can always go back and make the belt buckle look nicer, this, that, and the other thing. But overall, does the character play? Is it Han Solo, or is it the belt buckle? Who cares about Han Solo's belt buckle at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I totally in the same page. But I think I consider me more like designer than illustrator when I design something as a concept artist. And think about my job, my purpose is more like giving them information about this character, not making a great illustrate. So my job is done when I feel like there is enough information for the next step. So that's when I'm done. Yeah. And for illustration, I just ask them these three that how do you think? And when they approval, it's done. Yep.
Cool. Okay, I'm gonna jump over to another question that was submitted before this, and I know in the book itself we talk a little bit about this. So the question is, each cinematic has a distinct tone and atmosphere. Did you refer to specific TV shows or films while working on each cinematic? And just to add to that question a little bit, it's like, for all of you, if there was maybe a genre that you found themes or inspirations in for some of the cinematics you worked on, maybe we could talk about those a little bit. And I'll just like kick it off. I'll just say, like, maybe Jason, obviously for Reunion, there's like Western themes, right?
the weird thing is we didn't want that to be a Western. It was a musical, and somehow it ended up looking like a Western. I don't get it. No, that was clear. We knew that was one of the things even going into it, before even Ash was even a character, was like we knew it was McCree, and we were going to do it, on the 66 Route 66 map. Like we knew it was pretty clear from the outset that it's like, yeah, that needs to feel like a Western. That needs to feel like, what for lack of a better term, what tropes and things like that can we put in here, but put a fresh spin on, the tumbleweed going through, or the style of the music. Music was a huge one in that I don't think it would even feel as much like a Western without the music in that piece. So even how we shot things, with camera angles and stuff like that, yeah, it was we did look a lot of spaghetti Westerns and stuff like that, and just understand the visual language that was used for a lot of this. Like, it's so weird when you're like, what's a Western to different people? Some it's a spaghetti Western, some it's Unforgiven, some it's Quick and the Dead. Like, everybody has a kind of a different favorite Western and favorite shots in a Western. So it's a matter of distilling that all down to what feels right. Like when you see it and you feel it, it's like this, yeah, it's a Western. But doing something like something just slightly different, like the Storm Rising piece, which was actually done in IGC, but it was also, we were like, how do we push this as far as we can go? That was more like, how do we do a James Bond type car chase type of that? So we looked at different scenes and different things of like, how do you get that intensity of that motion, put the camera low to the ground as cars are veering back and forth. It was like, how do you get like Fast and the Furious meets James Bond meets Mission Impossible meets all these kind of things? And it's like, again, what are the visual languages that you can, that just when you see it, or you feel it, and when you start to string it together with the story, it's like, okay, that's really cool and that's working. But it also becomes unique to Overwatch in how it's applied, especially once you get the art style and all the kind of other kind of stuff in there.
Cool. I'll also say that I remember something we talked about was Honor and Glory, the Reinhardt piece, and maybe some of, and Ben, you can speak to this more, but maybe some of like the color palette, and I'm sure for you the shots and stuff too, being sort of inspired by war films.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything I do is influenced by what I consume in the last, like, childhood, adulthood. I'm a product of '80s, so there's a lot of like late '80s, early '90s animation, cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon vibe in some of the stuff I did, like the dragon stuff. It's a little bit of G.I. Joe, a little bit of Ninja Scrolls and anime mixed in together. Bastion it's a sort of a tribute to like some of the stuff that Miyazaki did, and Reinhardt. It's Reinhardt. It's a mix, right? There's a lot of big, heavy armor dudes, hammer things and action. So that's a lot. There's a lot of that action stuff in there, but also I play Reinhardt a little bit during my time to play, Overwatch. I stopped playing because I'm just getting too old, and all the young teenagers are kicking my butt online. But when I play Reinhardt. This is how I play. I charge into the people rather than put my shields up to kind of defend.
You are the worst Reinhardt player.
I
You're
am.
one of those.
I am. I'm totally. I fly off the edge and kill myself. Yeah. But if I take one down with me, I think my job was done, right? And they put the charge in there for a reason, right? So that's something that I try to incorporate as much as I can into the game. Like I try to play every character. If I'm to make like a short form about Mei, so I'll try to play Mei as much as I can, to try to understand what the character do in the game. So that's so it's a combination of everything, the movie that I watched, the storybook I read, and part of it taking some cue from the game as well.
And at least for Sombra, I'll say I got to give a shout out. One of my original ideas of timing and pacing came from Chuck Jones' Bugs Bunny cartoons, and I think that's a lot of what I was thinking with Sombra, and just in trying to find a character for her. I think of her as Bugs Bunny through and through. She's somebody that's messing with the team at the beginning of the episode, and then even messing with Katja by the end and booping her on the nose. She is absolutely everybody else's Daffy Duck to her Bugs Bunny. Yeah, if you haven't spent some time digging into Chuck Jones and his sense of timing, I would definitely look at him as, to me, one of the best ever storytellers and sense of timing.
I will never look at Sombra the same way now, yeah. Having heard that.
You should give him a carrot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can do.
So Junga, for you, are there certain, like, I guess if you're working on a different character, are there certain inspirations you kind of draw from depending on who that character is?
I can't really think of one specific things right now, but as Ben said, it's kind of help that sometimes I share a same reference. I'm maybe not in a same generation with you guys, like the director people, but sometimes it helped to search some, some 80s reference or something what they think.
She's
We
saying
just
we're
got called
old.
old.
Yeah, she just said we're old. Okay.
I just said the same thing. Not the same generation.
Okay, maybe not American culture. I'm from Korea, so maybe I only know like something related Korea, not really America, like apple pie.
Yeah.
But
That's
so
that's a
sometimes
horrible save.
so sometimes it really helps that search some reference at the same page with my team directors and people. Um, Maybe I can right now I can just one thing I can think one thing that I didn't design for Diva's teammate for Diva Cinematic is the design done by Ben Zhang. I just draw them, but when I draw them, I just thinking about Power Ranger or some K-pop star because they are kind of like Korean superstar like Diva. So I drew like the more like cute and like K-pop star. Yeah.
Do you ever? I mean, you said you had a kind of a fashion background. I mean, do you ever go and look at the real life counterparts of a lot of like? Do you go and look at like an Alexander McQueen's work to ever inspire you, or Iris Van Herpen, or John Galliano? Like, do you ever look at the real life fashion designers and go, "Oh, I can take a little bit of this influence and that influence from things"? I mean, are you ever going and mining from that, or is it mostly staying in the gaming?
Well, at the beginning of concept artist career, I actually use it as a reference, but well, I'm working as a concept artist more and more in video game industry. The real fashion design and video game design are so different. And even though I use a very current like fashion trend and show my teammate, they don't really understand because it's just such a different, different, interests and different thoughts. So I think what kind of reference you use for the, for someone to your client, who is your client, who, that's really important as a, concept artist. So right now I don't really use it for the fashion thingy too.
Gotcha. And also how old your client is probably important.
Yes.
Generation.
We don't have any fashion sense.
Definitely not in the 80s.
By the way, this is sorry, I don't in the book we don't have like the full lineup of Diva's teammates, but just in reference to what you're talking about, Jung, there's this image has like some of the designs for those, like one of the mechs that was messed up, and down here are two of those characters, two of Diva's teammates. But yeah, those were all really cool because each of them had a really specific personality just from the visual. Like you could kind of see like what their personality is from how they were designed. Those were very nice. So I want to jump to something to make sure we talk about it, because this book isn't just about the pre-rendered cinematics. This also contains stories and art from the origin stories and the IGCs. So I want to ask a couple questions about those just to make sure we get your thoughts on those. So let me say first, maybe to Doug or anyone else who wants to jump in. Jason, you've done this too, and Ben, you've done this too. It's like, what are some of the differences going from directing a pre-rendered cinematic to one of these, we call them 2.5D origin stories? Because obviously the format is very different, but you're still telling a story. So I'm just curious how you go from one of those projects to the other.
So just to kick it off, I guess, for me, I had to think the opposite way. I had to go from 2.5D to having a camera that actually moved freely. So that was a big jump for me, because I came from comics and from illustration. So I was used to composing an image based on how it made the image look best. And then finding a way to translate that into the real world cameras, I guess, was the challenge, because I was like, man, when do I get to the painting? That's still the way I think about things. I still think about things in terms of kind of key imagery, and that key imagery to me is an illustration or a concept painting. You'll see that maybe even more evidently in the Diablo piece that I did, the announcement piece. There's a lot of very grand kind of Renaissance influenced imagery in there. But even here on the Echo piece, for instance, I'm a big fan of symmetry. I always look at symmetry as being something that takes from ancient religious paintings, but it also gives a sense of strength and presentation and majesty. So for Echo's shot here, symmetry was a must-have, and I was really pushing Ness Kane for the symmetry on this particular image, for instance, and the payoff, because this is a character that's being born in this moment as well, which takes me back to kind of a religious iconography yet again. But yeah, so the difference between it is obviously, like on this piece, you had 3 or 4 paintings to tell an entire, story, versus however many shots you might get for a cinematic. And granted, those cinematics are going to be longer, but you're just trying to convey, the highlight reel of somebody's life. What are some touchstone moments for them? And with Mina Leao, we had those few beats. You're just skipping the rock across the pond. But yeah, I think it's probably not that much different. It's almost like you're just doing a really tight storyboard. You're still trying to convey an idea either way. You're still trying to get across who this person is and what they've gone through, and why we should care as a viewer, as an emotion as well. I guess that's
the key words that you said that resonated. Is it is kind of a highlight reel, as we're thinking about the arc of any character's journey through how they became that character. What are the key moments in time? Because there's only we only use 7 or 8 images for any one of these 2.5D pieces. That we're able to separate them out and create a lot of motion and make it feel, there's a lot going on at times. But it is about that moment in time, or the highlight reel, or what is it that changed a character or set them on paths, and just drilling down to those moments, and just trying to leverage those in the overall. We still have to tell a good story. I mean, we still go through the whole story process with the writers and the game team of what are the core, what is this character's needs, what is this character's wants, what are this character's obstacles, and how do we tell the best story, with 7 or 8 images and doing that.
And I guess, Jason, just to jump off of that into IGC, the IGC then is another different medium that we're telling stories in. So with, you mentioned Storm Rising earlier, and the Retribution IGCs.
That thing called Overwatch 2.
Yeah.
It's a different... a lot of the skill sets are the same, but it's such a different beast in the sense that a pre-rendered cinematic or a movie or anything like that is built in a very linear fashion of that. We come up with the story, do the animatic, do the previs, and once that's all approved, for the most part, you're on the rails going forward. There are going to be technical issues and problems that we run into and stuff like that, but what you're making. Game development as a whole is a very iterative process. It's a lot of experimenting to find out what is fun. And you may go into a development phase for a story or whatever, and the plan is we're going to make the mission. The mission is going to be X, and the characters needed to go here to here to here. And so we need a cinematic that, the story that gets us into the gameplay and gets us out of the gameplay. And we can go down that path and we can start building the animatic and the story and stuff like that. But as the gameplay develops, what was thought that was going to be fun isn't necessarily fun. And so a lot of times I have to back up and go down a different path, and that changes. And so being IGC is about remaining definitely flexible and being able and constantly, it's a constant reevaluation of where we are and what we need to do. We always know that, again, macro, this is what we're trying to achieve, but it's the micro that can change a lot more than I found in a pre-render world where, we are working with a partner who's a game team. Also, the other thing is it's supposed to feel like it goes from the cinematic into the game and then back to a cinematic, and it's supposed to feel like a more cohesive experience. Whereas, a full cinematic is much more of a passive if it's being fed to you, whereas the game, you are invested, you're ready to hit the controller, and hopefully like a good intro cinematic gets you to, well, I want to get to the character select because I want to just keep going. So it's also a matter about playing with emotions at different levels at different points of getting people's energy levels or expectations, so they want to play that level or play that game. So we're finding that in a normal cinematic might continue longer to tell the full story, but part of our story is in the gameplay. So it's a real marriage of the two, and finding out how to best work with the game teams and tell a story across, I guess, multiple mediums, but having it feel like just a fully engaging experience.
Interesting about the IGCs as well, and it's kind of inherent in them because they, as you said, they lead into gameplay and have an outro for the gameplay. But like for Storm Rising, for instance, you have to, and for Retribution, you're dealing with a lot of different characters, and big characters. Like you have this team, right? And so there's each of these little stories, there's going to be a different team dynamic for these characters, but it affects everything, right? Like everyone is animated a little differently, written differently.
It's a fun challenge. It is a challenge at times on the multiple different levels, because what is the character's voice? Reinhardt speaks very differently than Genji, than Tracer, than Mercy, and so it really is a matter of understanding and knowing these characters. And the interesting thing that we found over time is like even inside Blizzard, we found that different people have different interpretations of who these characters are or what their inner monologue is. And so it's a matter of finding, okay, what is that, or what is right, or what does everybody agree on that this is going to be this character going forward. And I'm not talking it totally changes the character in any meaningful way, but it's, again, what's the core things driving these characters. And so but that bleeds over into animation too. Again, Genji and Reinhardt don't move the same, and so our animators are phenomenal about learning the language of these characters, and not only learning but developing. It's not like it comes from someplace else. It's not like we've watched reference of somebody else made how Tracer moves, or Genji, or or Doomfist, or whoever. We've had to go and create that, and it evolves over time, but it's awesome to watch our artists do this and work with us together to make sure that each character feels unique in the universe, but it is a cohesive universe. It is a cohesive story.
Cool. I'm going to jump over. So we have about, let's say, 15 minutes left. I'm going to jump to a question submitted in the chat, and it's a little similar to the question earlier about which was maybe your most challenging cinematic or design to work on, but this one is about characters specifically. So I'll frame it this way: it's like, which character do you find the most challenging to maybe incorporate into one of these cinematics, and it could be in terms of animation, the writing, the design. And the example given was, I feel like Reaper would be difficult to animate because of his Wraith abilities. So I'm just curious for each of you if there's one of these characters that just for whatever reason it's like, yeah, like their abilities are a challenge, or something else.
Somebody want to jump in on that one?
Yeah,
Go.
I'll do it. Yeah, I mean, once again, back on Sombra, since this is my only 3D experience for Overwatch, I actually had a lot of fun with Reaper. A lot of it comes from not knowing what I was asking for, which caused some concern with the effects team to some degree. And Jason, we're going to rely on you for an effects team story as well, I think, at some point. But I know that with the effects team, I had Reaper jumping off the ledge of something and landing kind of in a splash of that smoke thing. He leapt off a ledge, landed, turned right into smoke, and then he starts going through the frame, and he winds up at that door, in the Sombra piece, where now she's messing with him. She opens it a crack, and then he starts to go through, and she smashes it closed, and then she opens it again and smashes it. That's the Bugs Bunny thing. But I remember the smoke, because I wanted him to pretty much go from that smoke form and walk almost right out of the smoke, as if he was being formed by the smoke itself, into a human being again, to go through that door. And I remember that actually was, to your point, a pretty big ask, and I didn't realize that. I was just like, you just do it. It's going to be cool. And so I got called into the office of the FX supervisor at the time, and he was like really concerned, because he wanted to honor what I was doing in the boards, but he was like, man, this is going to be a super expensive shot for us, and we just don't have kind of that time or money. So his solution was, having Reaper kind of come up and dip down, the smoke that is, dips down below frame and then comes back up, and he's Reaper now with just some smoke coming off of him. And when he dummied that up for me to see, I was kind of like, dude, yeah, that totally works. That's great. That's all good. But he was really concerned. It was like, oh my God, he's going to really want him to just come from being smoke right into a human right across screen. And we're going to have to, evolve that over time. And that's going to just take a lot of work for us. But, he had a solution, and it worked really, really well. And so it took what could have been a tough thing into an easier thing. And it still worked for the nature of the story. So I guess Reaper is tough, but he's also super fun. I mean, that smoke element is a blast to work with.
He was in the Winston, in Recall. Winston cinematic as well. Yeah. I remember smoke form.
The original cinematic too.
Oh, right, yeah.
That was his smoke. I think that the question here, what character is the hardest for you? Reading the chat, which character is the hardest to animate, write, storyboard? It's not even one character or one. Like for Reaper, what's hard in that is like the smoke element effects, super hard. I have scenes where I have Genji talking to Zenyatta. I don't have faces. I have basically picture, two faceless characters, and the same thing happens with Reaper, but having to communicate, and you have to get emotion across, and like, are they mournful? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? And so that's when, we really have to work with our animators for body language. So something on the page that might seem like, okay, this Omnic talks to another Omnic or whatever, that no big deal. And even the storyboard and the previs, no big deal. But when you actually get to making it interesting visually, that's when challenges happen. So the challenges lay all over the place. Like there's minefields everywhere that sometimes you don't even know about till you're almost on top of it. The Reaper smoke definitely affects. Oh boy, you can definitely get into problems there. But there are definitely other areas where you're just like, how does that work? Having scientists, multiple scientists, like when you're writing on the page, does this line sound more like Winston or more like May, or does this sound like? That's actually something like Moira would say, instead of like, it's also finding the language of the character. So I don't think there is one character who's specifically, and I'm just kind of doing a mental inventory, is specifically harder than the rest, but I think all of them have something where eventually you'll be like, oh, I hadn't thought, oh, tracer blinks, we have to incorporate the blink. How does that blink? Oh, wait, there's all sorts of little things here that that you find yourself kind of tripping over that you maybe didn't think about initially as you're developing the story.
Yeah, same. Like every cinematic, every short has a problem, and then we have to figure out how to solve it. I can tell you one big problem for every single one, but that'll bore you guys to death. But
Yeah, same here. Like again, I don't need to take care of the technical issues or anything. So I'm lucky as an artist. But sometimes budget, they ask me to make this character, because of budget, let's cut her hair shorter, or because of budget, let's make this character bold or something. So I need to change the design because of that. Otherwise, there is nothing really specific character come up that really hard. Yeah.
All I know is that the new Reinhardt is 1,000 times easier for me because he doesn't have a helmet anymore. The new design, they took it off.
Right.
Now he has a face, so he can emote.
Right.
Well, the old design has a helmet, so doesn't have to have facial expressions.
Well, true.
Right?
But okay. Let's flip the script for a second. When we're looking at budget and popsicle sticks, having a scene with 2 characters with no facial animation is a lot easier on the animation budget than having to worry about a bunch of lip sync and stuff like that too. So there are sometimes benefits for having those things pop up, but I'd much rather have a character emoting and seeing their eyes and all that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, for Bastion, our and
Bastion, perfect.
lip sync and VO budget was very little. I don't know why. I don't know how that happened. But...
Yeah, they always like go away.
I just said that bird wouldn't shut up.
Oh, yeah.
that was the only lip sync I gotta do. But Bastion has his own challenge, like you said. Like you gotta make sure that he's a living creature that has to emote. And he almost had like a child quality to it when he wakes up. So yeah, everything has a challenge. We have to make special rigs for Bastion so that he can do all the jiggling that he's doing, right? Like we want to make sure that he feel like a old pickup truck or old automobile, like worn down, but still got some life into it, right? So every time he walks around, he's vibrating, everything's jiggles a little bit, and then he also his interaction with the bird and anything around him is almost like has an innocent child quality to it, because that he's seeing it for the first time. So try to get that out of a robot with a gun on his hand, and I think an animator did an awesome job sort of capture that quality. Oh, also one thing I learned from just doing these shorts is anytime you try to transform something, it's a pain in the rear end. I have so much respect for people who design like transformers, because you got to make sure that all these metal pieces fit and be able to manipulate so that they can create a different shape. The stuff that we did for Diva, these squid-looking Omnic that has to transform. They don't have to do a whole lot, but every time you involve like mechanical stuff that moves around, it really put a big time constraint on time sort of sink onto the concept artist, because they have to. I remember Manuel was doing the concept for these guys, and he has to spend a lot of time figure out the transformation. Same thing with the giant robot that was in God, I get those names mixed up. 0 Hours, the giant, 5-story high robot. Manuel has to basically figure out how all the parts are moving, so they're not colliding. So there's a constant back and forth between him and the modelers, because you draw something and then it works in 2D. Once you put it in the 3D, there's going to be something that needs to be adjusted. Good thing that he's a very capable 3D artist, so he was able to model some of the stuff beforehand and then sort of paint on top of that to achieve that.
I'd add to that. Interesting, maybe for Overwatch is I remember talking to maybe Arn about Doomfist's Gauntlet, about the Doomfist, and I think a lot of tech in Overwatch is designed in a way where it's like it should work. Like if you were to really like build each piece you see in a design, then it would actually, everything has like a functional purpose in what you're seeing. So that's really interesting, but it means it's challenging to create it. Also, Junga, sorry, were you gonna say something earlier? I just wanted to make sure.
No,
Okay.
I forgot. But you just reminds me one thing, that yes, Overwatch is very need to be very functional, but also it's also magical world. Like we're not a real mechanic designer or something. Just reminds me that when I designed a May's gun for the cinematic, she's making gun in the Ben, you can help me, but she need to build some gun from the stuff surround her.
From kitchen, yeah.
Yeah, like kitchen stuff, drug bottle, or like the base body is like hair dryer, which just doesn't make sense at all. But yeah, we can be really creative for design for video game. Yeah.
It totally makes sense. We can totally make that with
For
parts
sure, yeah.
laying around our office. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like
that,
for the design here, I think it's funny because half the design came from storyboards, because when we were doing storyboards, and then also half of it came from concept, because I know, Jongwon, you were doing concept a little bit before, or almost the same time as we were making the cinematics, the storyboard. So you did this drawing of, I remember, I think you were doing a drawing of her picking up a hair dryer, right?
Yep,
And then
yep.
and we're like, that should be the body of the gun, because
Mhm.
it has like a handle, and then it sort of grew from there. Like, what do we use for her big giant, the cryo tube? All right, we look around the office and say, oh, well, maybe a water cooler thing will work, right? So these are things that we just kind of pick up here and there, and then composite it together, put basically kind of duct tape and kit bash together.
Mhm.
And that's a really cool experience, working with you, working with the storyboard artists, you guys all working together, sort of going back and forth. I think there was time where, like when storyboard artists would come to the concept artists and go, hey, we were doing this board, what's the design of the character? Because everything sort of happened, not everything sort of happened at the same time, but sometimes, like you guys are designing the characters, and then the board artist is doing, or the environment, and the board artist is doing the same sequence with say character or environment. So there's a lot of collaboration that happens all the time during the working progress, during the production, the pre-production and the production.
Cool. So we just have a few minutes left. So I want to ask one final question that was submitted. And so earlier we were talking about, like, how to overcome creative block and, being patient and all that. So this is similar, but it's a bit more of a practical question. And that is, for people who are looking to pursue a similar career path as you, what advice do you have for them? So I'll start with Junga. So for people who are looking to become a visual development artist, is there any advice you can give them, things they should work on or try to do?
Well, I didn't really, pursue my career as a visual development artist. I started as a concept artist first. But some of my coworkers are artist coworker. They work for animation studio first and became to here. I think my strength is previously I worked for video game studio as a concept artist, and that is really helped me to understand the process of game developing, and also work with these people. So yeah, I think that's it.
What about for you directors?
I don't think I ever imagined myself being a director. I never go into this career path thinking that I was going to be a director. I think I said, like, I started as an animator, and then I would have been fine just animate all my career, I think, back then. But I wouldn't trade it for anything currently. But and then storyboard was one of those things I always wanted to do. So I think my advice would be to kind of keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, and continue to sort of do the thing that you cared the most, right? Like when I was doing animation, I really love story, and I love drawing. So I would draw these boards, or I'll be like, hey, guys, I know this next project's coming up. Do you guys have any storyboard, or do you guys need anything else? And then they're like, what can you do? And I'm like, well, I could probably do some story panels for you guys for the next whatever WoW cinematics, and I'll go for it. So I was lucky. So I guess part of it is try to push yourself and then go out of your comfort zone and do stuff that, try different things, but also network and be able to work well with other. I think working well with others is a huge part of being an artist in the video games industry, because our industry is so small. You have to be able to be, you got to treat everyone nice. You got to be able to work with anyone and everyone. That's my advice.
Have popsicle sticks ready to go. Just
and you should eat a lot of popsicles and keep all the popsicle sticks out with you.
I think just from a traditional standpoint, storyboard artists and editors move into director roles more often, just because they are so closely tied to directors in the story creation process. That doesn't mean now I didn't come from that background. I came from lighting, compositing, but I did have a background in story, and it was something that I, on a regular basis, I'm like, this is something I'm interested in, until finally smaller projects came along where they're like, okay, do you want to take on the small project that basically nobody else wants to do, or that everybody else is busy? Take the opportunity, even if it's not something that you're like, this is it, this is what I've been waiting for. It's like any opportunity is a chance for you to express yourself and put your spin on it. So and then that just grows, and then you also get to find out if it's something you really want to do. Blizzard has had several people try out to be directors. What I mean try out is like, literally, here's an opportunity. Do you want the opportunity? Here's the opportunity. And they do it once or twice and go, I don't want anything to do with this. This is like, I'm actually happier in what I was doing. I didn't realize there was politics or whatever else involved. So it's some people get there and realize it isn't what they want to do, but don't, just look for the opportunities. And they are there. And I know that sounds very open-ended, but again, to Ben's point, if you're pushing yourself and trying new things and constantly just trying to reinvent yourself, it might be too big, but it happens. It'll happen. The opportunity will be there.
Yeah, definitely. To Jason's point, no opportunity is too small if it's something you really want to do. I think the place, Jason, I think you started on the Heroes of the Storm pieces, isn't that right? Yeah. And those were smaller, less than a minute, and you had to do a lot with basically nothing.
It was pure machinima, so there was no custom animation, no special cameras, and it was like, turn these around like every 2 to 3 weeks, and it was a run and gun thing, and I don't say that in a bad way. I said it's like, this is what you're signing up for, and that's fine. But it was a great learning experience, great test bed, great, it was some of the best schooling for it I could have ever have done.
And a lot of, like you said, a lot of other folks tried their hand at it as well and realized this wasn't so much for them. And granted, that's not all directing will ever be, as Jason's learned. I mean, he's gotten to go on and do the pre-render and IGC and everything else, but it really does let you know, like, if you're not in for the worst of it, that's usually where you're going to start. You're never going to get to start with like, okay, my first directing job is going to be Star Wars, and I'm going to get Final Cut on this thing as well. You're always going to have feedback. You're probably going to start with less than anybody else had. Certainly on the 2.5D stuff or the Shao House stuff that I did, it wasn't meant to be a cinematics per se. It wasn't even being looked at by the company at that time as a cinematics thing. It was myself, Laurel, and an editor across the street by the name of Lucas Marino, and just support from Chris Metzen that really kind of made that happen. It was a really small team, and we pretty much did Shao Hao at the end of our work days, so to speak, along with our other work. And so we just made it work because we were interested in telling a story. So I think if you're passionate about telling stories, and if you feel like you would succeed in telling other people's stories and you can add to it, then that's what I would look towards. But yeah, having the key component of being a storyteller, even back when I was doing comics or illustration, for me, the funnest part of any of that was breaking down the story. I had less of an interest in finishing stuff and putting the patina on it, the highlight on the nose, so to speak, than I was in breaking down, like, what is the solution to the bigger problem? And so I think for me personally, that's why I've gravitated and prefer directing now than I do illustration for myself, because I like the gestation period, the beginning, the problem solving. And there are so many people that are better than I am at putting the patina on it. You know, like my cohort, Laurel Austin, for years. Man, Laurel can spend 2 to 3 weeks on a painting and make it sing and stay interested and engaged that entire time. Even as an illustrator, if I spent 3 or 4 days on a piece, I kind of just wanted to die. Like it was like the idea was done when I solved it in the sketch stage. So now to finish it just became a slog, and it shouldn't be, you know. But that's the way it was for me, because the juice was in the idea. It was in getting the idea solved. And as soon as I could convince you I had solved the idea, I was like, all right, I'm done. Success. But that's not the way it works out for an illustrator. You actually have to finish your drawing and painting in order to get paid. So yeah, I feel like I get pretty lucky in the sense that I found something that allows me to be in that creation stage at all times and work with a bunch of really smart people that'll make up for my deficiencies.
Yeah, same here. Like I think one of those, I'm as an animator, I tend to animate really quickly and then get to like 80%, and I'll be like, I'm done. You know, the last 20% it's excruciating for me. That's why I think I was never cut out to be an animator, because like certain animator had that quality. Like I want to polish that last 5 to 2%, you know, to until it's pristine and clean and perfect, where I'm just like, oh man, it's 90% there. I'm done, guys. I can't take it anymore. I need a new shot.
I think
but-
that's why. Oh, sorry.
No,
I
go
think
ahead.
That's why I'm more like designer, concept artist more than illustrator. I can't do like Aurora like 3 weeks for one illustration. I might be die, but yeah, I'm more like throwing idea, and you know, that's more for me. So yeah.
100%. I'm with you.
One other thing is you know, being a director is be able to like you eventually you're gonna want that job, and then you know, it took, I can, you know, and then maybe as a concept as well, like once you set your sight on something, I think you really have to go after it. You know, all of us sitting here work really hard try to achieve that goal. You know, like I think just looking back, like when we were you know, trying out that there at Blizzard, there was a trial for directors. So like a lot of us tried out for that. I think Jason, you also did something for it, right? So I think the people who actually participate in that trial eventually did end up getting chance to direct one way or the other. So I think, you know, and that going through that trial, I think it made me realize I really wanted that job. You know, as an artist, you know, you know, I'm a very shy person. I don't do well talking in front of people. So one of the things that we had to do as a director is to pitch your ideas. So during the trial, what we have to do is we have to make a story. We have to pitch to like the executives and the people that decides your, you know, your fate. And really that took me a long time to try to get over. So what I did that I didn't tell anybody is I made the pitch, and I went to like this big giant room. We used to have a big theater room, and I would just get on in front of the stage and talk to like the empty room. Basically pretend I was pitching to like a room full of people, and I did that enough time that I become somewhat proficient in doing so, just by keep trying and iterate and basically force myself to do stuff that I'm not comfortable doing. And I still get stuck sometimes, you know, once in a while in a big crowded space or pitching in front of a people. I completely forget what I was gonna say, and I'm just like, uh-oh, I guess I have to make it up.
Cool. Well, I'm just gonna call it since we're a little bit over, but thanks, Junga, Doug, Jason, Ben, for doing this. Like, all of you are extraordinarily talented and super fun to work with. And thanks to all the other people who worked on these cinematics that obviously aren't here, but they contributed
Thanks to
them.
the writing team,
Yeah.
to Robert and Andrew and George and the people that put up with us, and storyboard artists,
all those
animation.
people. Yeah. And to everyone who came to this event as well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
you,
showing up.
everybody.
Thank you so much.